Well, here we are. We're at Kristen's house. We're filming with Ryan Meeks. We got him. We tricked him into flying up and hanging out with us for a couple hours. And we didn't tell you these questions in advance, but this is our last recorded thing for EastLake. We're having our final recorded discussion. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We have questions that we've written down, and we wanted to at least spend some time, an hour or so.
Yes.
Hearing from you. We love you. Thanks for coming up and hanging out with us.
You're welcome. I love you guys.
Thank you for saying yes.
Yeah, absolutely. This is fun.
I think it's appropriate that I shared the story about when I called you to ask if you would do this. I said the analogy to me was like we were putting down the family dog. And totally. We wanted to do it gently and with care. And your response to me was, yeah, like Old Yeller. And I was like, yeah, no.
You remember the movie?
Not like Old Yeller.
Just go shoot it.
Just shoot it.
I get it. Yeah, I had been gone a few years.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
I think we already did that. Now we're going to go back and do it.
I was like, is that dog still going?
Yes.
Your
Okay,
first
so
question when you texted him.
We texted you. The three of us were on a group text. And when we first reached out to you and said, hey, we're calling it. We're going to officially shut this thing down. Yeah. And we called you to see if you had any opinions about it, any things you wanted to say. And you were like, no, not really. Which wasn't surprising
I already
to us.
did that.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us for this video.
Yes.
But then when we did the public announcement and we had a video update and we sent it out to former staff members and some of the people who had spoken, and you were on some of them, and you texted us, man, it's wild realizing it's finally over. Lots of emotions swirling. And I want to ask you, what were some of those?
I think most of it has been just gratitude. It's oh man, it's really coming to a close, and I got to be a part of that amazing experience, and I wouldn't be anything like the way I am, which I like, by the way. I could be taken a million different directions, but to me, it's positive.
Yeah.
And it was just man, that was an important part of my life, and I'm so grateful that I got to be part of it. So it was mostly gratitude, and then there was this sense of empty space. There's I don't know, maybe this is a weird analogy, but I never had this, but a lot of people they go off to college and they get to come back to their childhood home or whatever, and there's kind of something about not having it at all, that there's this thing that used to be that you can't even ever go back to, which is actually always true anyway, right? They say you can never go home. But I think there was this an emotional sense of coming to terms with that, okay, it's really gone. Gratitude and grief, probably. Yeah, I loved that thing. I really did put a lot of myself into it. I was okay, close the chapter.
I think a reason why we're even wanting to do a final discussion on Reflections of EastLake is obviously you resigned a few years back, and part of the discussion I wanted to spend some time on is just thinking through, now that you've been away and now that you've had time to not be involved in EastLake, to live a life separate. I'm assuming a part of the process has been how do I untether my identity from this church I planted when I was a kid from who I am now.
Totally.
And that was honestly one of the things that I felt as we were wrapping your time at EastLake, the gift that we were trying to give you was it's okay. You aren't EastLake, you are a human, and EastLake is a thing. Yeah. But I'm just curious, as you've had some time away, what do you miss?
Yeah, oh man, there's lots of things I miss, because 90% of that 16-year experience for me was fucking fun. It was so fun. So I guess I can just say some of the things I miss, for sure the staff, all you guys. I just love these people to death, and we became something special. Even just last night getting together with so many of them, it was I don't just love those individuals. I love the thing that is created in the room when they're all in the same spot. There's something different. It's not just all these individuals together. Something else shows up in that space. And because
even
of our
now,
shared...
right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Even now.
And then even like back then, I think that was the thing that drew people
Yeah.
to Eastlake was there was this dynamic within the staff that people
wanted to be around.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What was
for
it?
sure.
Do you think?
Yeah, good question. I mean, one, again, we were fucking fun. Like, it's fun people, people who want to have fun. And like, just like last night, most of us haven't seen each other in a long time. And so at first it's like, hey, what's going on? Like, how old are your kids now? Like, you know, getting reacquainted. And then the whole rest of the night is just like laughing. And so there's just this, I think there's just this attractive energy. I mean, at the end of the day, that's why people came to Eastlake. That's why people chose Eastlake as their church. Nobody was coming to Eastlake like, exactly. Nobody was like, I've been to a bunch of churches, evaluated everyone's theology. Eastlake's got it figured out. We're the worst theology possible, as you could tell by the end. It was fun. And it was like happy, joyful people. And that's attractive. So I think that was part of it. And then all those people are like excellent at things. Like, it's not just like happy people who tell jokes, but like intelligent, smart, hardworking, good leaders, and that kind of, like attracts like. And so we did not have a hard time getting like professional, high quality leaders because we had a bunch of professional, high quality leaders on the team.
When we talked with Michelle, I was so happy to hear her say when she looked back, she just saw laughter like through it
funny.
all.
She did.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me because there were some not so fun times.
Yeah.
But when I'm with Eastlake people, it's just so fun.
Yeah.
And I find that really I think that's what probably kept us going during those kind of hard times when we could have thrown the towel in years and years and years ago.
Yeah. Without the staff, I think. I mean, it just comes down to without the staff, I would have left a long time ago, maybe almost 10 years earlier. But so where was I going to go? These are all my best friends. Like, I don't want to leave them. And also, you know, when I finally got to a place where I could start sharing with my best friends, like, hey, I'm starting to change. How does this hit you? This thought, am I crazy? And then we all started going, that does make sense. And I think that's what allowed us to go as far and as fast as we did through so much change was because we were all getting caught up in that, whatever that was just living us into a different perspective, into transformation. But I don't think any of us could have gone as far and as fast without all of us. You know, we needed to be able to look to the left and right and be like, hey, are you tracking? Are you okay? How are we doing? You know, because it was a storm all around us. But we were tracking with each other.
I do feel like when I think about the staff, I think about laughter, and I also feel like, are you here? Are you still here?
Right. I'll stick with it if you will.
I think it's funny that Michelle said laughter too, because I also think that there were a lot of hard things, especially towards the last sort of what I would call Act 3 of the life cycle of Eastlake. But I think something that Michelle and I were talking about just the other day is that we tend to have a perspective of being able to take that stuff and be like, and see how it like radically shifted us, even whether it was when I had cancer or something else. Like, all these things have actually been good things. They sound like bad things, but then I would not want to replace it because it ended up producing so much stuff, which is hilarious. Because do you guys remember that book, the Bible, that's like, consider it pure joy when you go through trials because it's going to produce something? Like, that's actually true. That's actually a good verse. Hang on to that one. Because we were on a walk the other day and we'd heard about something really, difficult was happening in their life. And I remember saying, gosh, some people just draw all the hard cards, and we're walking down the street and I'm like, our life has been so easy. And then we both paused for a second and looked at each other like, what? But and I like that I had to remind myself like that we had all those hard years at Eastlake and I had cancer and all this other stuff because it feels good to be the kind of person or to be in at least a spot in my life where I'm like, I fucking love it all. Like, I want to bless it all. Like, thank you, because all of it has served a particular function in my life that has been positive in the aggregate.
So when you were 25, and Michelle kind of told the story about you originally coming up to plant with someone else, and then that person changed their mind.
Yeah,
and
right.
you guys were like kind of already set on it.
You're gonna be the music guy.
Yeah,
gonna be the music guy.
I was going to be the music guy.
So when you decided to do this and you moved up here with Riley and Jagger, what were you hoping for?
Yeah, I mean, my wildest dream was like we were going to start a little church that our friends would go to, that, where people would find hope and community, and we could find a way to follow this Jesus thing in a way that didn't make us like these weird oddballs from culture, like where we would, where it would make practical sense in your life and you wouldn't have to get all weird and goofy spiritual, but that would work for people that was our age and younger. Because there's plenty of things for boomers or for my parents' generation. But I would have been so content, at least I thought, to pastor like a 300-person church for their whole run. Like I for sure did not expect what happened.
I'm curious what even compelled that. Was it just like growing, like obviously your dad's a pastor, but is it just like following in the footsteps of what your dad wanted you to like thought was a good career path? Like that's a pretty common
No, I
career
actually
path
think my
for-
parents wisely encouraged me not to do this.
Hey, we know you.
They're like, ministry's hard. Yeah. And of course I'd seen, I knew that. Like I'd watched everything my parents had gone through, but again, I was at a stage in my life that was still on that side of like I hadn't even gone through the sort of like age of 30 where you're really real evaluating yourself at a serious level, and so that early part of ego development and like building stage of your life, like it was more like achieve and go. I wanted to build something and do something, and it worked really well to be like, I know this world. I grew up in the church.
And I'm curious if you can go back and just list out some of the memorable acts or chapters, and maybe your experience at EastLake.
Oh, and okay, what it felt like for me,
like your chapters.
Yeah, I mean the first chapter is like the church fits in my garage. Like everything that was when the truck was on our front yard. I mean, eesh, I can't believe we did that. And then it was like upstairs at the junior high, and then it was downstairs at the junior high in the big gym, and then probably the big move into the building when we really were like, oh, this is a mega church, and we're like 3 years old, and I'm not even 30, and that was a crazy time of like having to get serious about like, oh, this isn't like a little church plant we're goofing off with. Like this is, I better grow up a little bit here. There's a lot of responsibility, and I even hire staff and all that kind of stuff. And then that's when, very privately, I started having misgivings, shall we say, about Christianity.
And you spoke to that though. Like, why did that offer you the ability to have misgivings, right? Because you were mentioning just more time to.
Yeah, more time. I mean, I wasn't leading. We had hired somebody to do music and all these other things, and at least enough that I could sit down and be like, oh, I don't need to just plagiarize Rick Warren or my dad or even myself. Like I was just repeating other sermons I had done or my dad had done or another one of my mentors had done until I had time. And I'm like, oh, dude, I have a couple days to write a sermon now. Oh, gee, this is luxury. Except that then it was like this rush of, all the doubts. I was like, oh, good. Now we can start addressing all these things you haven't had time for. And I was like, maybe that chapter's like, oh no, what's happening to my faith? or usually, actually back then it was much more positive. It was like, here comes the dark night of the soul that I will emerge from victorious and write a book about, And
did you really have that sort of idea?
Oh yeah,
like,
I remember
this is what,
early on.
This is
going to be a really positive thing. I'm going through this difficult thing, but I'm going to emerge. It's going to build my faith. And I was like, and I just read the Bible all the way through twice in the same year, which I had never done and never did again. After that second time, like, oh, okay, that made it way worse. And then
Did I miss something?
Yeah, totally. Well,
Read it a second time just to be sure
I
you got
did.
it.
I was like, I read it all. And then the next chapter was like more panic. That was more panic. Like the first telling you.
Okay, so panic
Yeah.
and then increased panic.
Well, the first one was like, this is going to be a great book. And the second one's like, no one's going to sign you to a book deal in the Christian world.
Yeah.
And, you know, somewhere in there is where I started like exposing the staff to like a little bit more, you know, crazy liberal theology. And I think Pete Rollins I even had come out because I had met him in New York. And I was like, hi, I'm a megachurch pastor in Seattle and I hate my life. Can you be my friend? And what a great friend he's been over the years. Then, next chapter is like, again, this is from my perspective.
Yeah,
There's lots of cool things happening in the church. And I think externally, most people, when they think of like the glory days of EastLake, that's what they think of.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm experiencing. Like I'm having a hell of a lot of fun. All my best friends work with me. We're having a blast. You know, we're giving away millions of dollars to amazing things. But inside, I'm going from, this is going to be a great book to no one's going to fucking sign you for anything. And when do I tell my wife I'm out on all of this religious stuff? And I'm going to lose my kids and my marriage and all my friends. I'm not going to be able to work with them anymore. Like, I'm just like trying to, how can I hang on to something to keep doing this? Yeah. And then it was like, as soon as we went multi-site, it was like positive in the sense that I got to take a further step back away from the church to work on this chaos that was going on in my life. And it was also hard because I started liking it a lot less. It just became so much more about locations and staffing and you know the staff had to like double and all, and I just started liking it less. Like this is just not what I wanted to do. You know, I liked it when it was smaller, you know, or whatever. And then
Don't worry, we did that.
yeah,
We were able to make it
We were
smaller.
able to make it smaller.
Yeah. Eventually it worked out great. We can definitely make it smaller.
Time out for just a minute.
Yeah.
Did you really think like this might cause my marriage to?
Oh yeah, for sure. I was confident at first that she would leave me. Like, how could she let me lead the family spiritually? You know what I mean? Like, and because Michelle was pretty, I mean, she would say this, she was into being senior pastor wife, all that stuff. She was getting super into that. I'm in the group of the queens of the big churches. And I was like, dodging book offers. Like, they want me to write a book and I'm inside. I'm like, no, you do not. You know, this is going to come down on me pretty soon. So yeah, I mean, I very much was concerned, at least that we would separate while I found my faith in Jesus or something, you know. Everything that happened after that was not as hard as worrying that I would lose proximity to my children and my relationship with Michelle. So once we got through that, then it was just like all this energy came back into me. Like, okay, well, we can do anything. It's like, it's going to be fine. And I actually feel more free based on stuff I've come to terms with. I was still wrestling with a ton of stuff. But in 2013, I'm like, there's some very fundamental things that I think can help people. And I need to start saying these things. So that's like when we did like You Mad Bro and some of those early series where I was talking about, you know, the violence text in the Old Testament and how this is the stuff that staffers had been bringing up for a long time. Like, what about LGBT conversation? You know, there were so many more progressive people on our team than I was ready to move forward with, but started feeling safe enough to really start, you know, evaluating that as a group and making that a conversation that was okay to just open. And then, of course, I had to read 70 books on it. I remember having finished that, going through everything we went through, and then a year later being like, I don't care at all what any of the books say. Like, you know, I had, for some reason, that was that part of my process. And
You've always been that way with taking in all of the information.
Yeah.
Probably so that you could then just be okay with what you already think.
Yeah, I mean, I look back now and I'm like, I tried so hard for so many years to try to defend that I was a Christian. And eventually realizing like, I should have just lost that battle early on. Like, I'm whatever you think I am. Now look at my life and decide what that is. Like, you know, so yeah. And I guess that there was that big chapter of like, we led the church through this transition of like, we need to say something here. And I mean, that was like, you know, to use the putting the dog down. I mean, the analogy back then was like, look, we we could just leave and let this big megachurch that doesn't affirm the LGBT community stay here. But that feels irresponsible since I started it. Like, let's put the rabid dog down with some of the phrases.
You used to say that, yeah.
Let's not just let this dog roam the neighborhood and bite a bunch of gay kids and tell them they're a problem to God. Like, let's either burn it to the ground or fix it.
Yeah.
So we did both.
We tried to fix it for a while. Right? We didn't start with burning it to the ground.
Yeah.
Right?
And I feel
Unless
like
you
we
call
were,
ancient future faith burning it to the ground.
yeah, that's true. There were a few things we would, but that's an important point, I think, too, because since 2013, we'd already been attacking all these sacred cows. Like the Bible being the inerrant word of God was like the first thing I wanted to work on. I was like, you're going to make some enemies here. And so that's 2013. So 2 years later is when we finally did that. So we'd already been sort of like chipping away at the foundation. And then it's like, oh, by the way, Time Magazine's going to out us as gay affirming.
Yeah.
So
next week.
So we should probably tell the church.
We should tell the church since Time already did. And then it was just like at least a year of just like constant fighting. People just wanted to take everybody out to coffee to bitch them out. So that was tough.
Fun. That was fun.
That was a rough year for sure. Very tiring. Went to therapy at the end of that year. Mm-hmm. Very good decision. And then, then after that, it got fun again. Because we closed everything down, went to one location, somehow kept limping along. Like every couple of weeks, we're like, oh, we're out of money. And then we'd sell one of the buildings. We're like, we got a couple more weeks or whatever. Yeah. And I don't know how we kept that thing alive with how much money we lost so fast, Mm-hmm. But it was fun again. Then we were like free to just like, look, we don't know what the truth is, but we want to live well. And that's when to live as a beneficial presence in the world became like our slogan. Which is like, how can you not get behind that idea? That's a good way to live.
Seems pretty positive.
Yeah. And it just got fun because we could be honest about where we were at in our journey, and none of us who spoke had to be on the same page. We could be like, here's where I'm at, and I'm kind of. So it just felt more true and honest, and we were free. We didn't have to defend anything anymore. It was just kind of like, this could be wrong, but here's where I'm at. And I really enjoyed that season, which was only a year, and then I got cancer. Mm-hmm. And was gone for a year. So if you want to kill a church, kids, start by attacking the inerrancy of Scripture, affirm the LGBT community, and then get cancer and leave for a year. That's a good recipe for. So that was one hell of a year. And I remember meeting with you guys, telling you guys I had cancer, and I was like, and by the way, when I beat this, I got to get the hell out of here. Like, this is a lot. Yeah. But I didn't. I couldn't leave.
But my friends still work here.
My friends still work here, and I don't. Yeah, I was like, I remember being worried. Like, I don't want to kill it. I don't want to kill it. And I felt responsible to like make sure everybody gets jobs. Like we're all trying to get jobs. And I really enjoyed the season of having Stan around, so he could like help all the people who really missed Bible stuff. Be like, talk to Stan, the walking Bible boy. I loved that. He was so great and so helpful for all that stuff. Yeah. And then, something just at the end of 2019, it was like, you got to get out of here. I mean, even at January 2018, when I went on that vision quest out in the desert for 14 days, the very first day of being alone and out there, it was like, you're done. This isn't yours anymore, was the overwhelming thing. And I remember I just cried about it. Like, I was so worried about letting like you guys down specifically, like the two of you. I remember like thinking about that, like all these people who I took them on this like crazy ride that people lost family over this. Like people, they don't speak to their family anymore because, they're not doing it right anymore. So I think I did definitely for a while carried a lot of just like, I just want to take care of everybody, This has provided a sense of family for people who lost their family over this. So I finally was just like straw that broke the camel's back. I had no more energy in me, and I was like, I got to get out of here.
Yeah. I think a lot of people know that outside the EastLake chapters and stories, but I wanted to hear from your perspective because there was another story going on. Mm-hmm.
I think it's fascinating to be reminded too of your own, like when you were moving into Montevilla, when like the megachurch growth phase was when I joined. You were hiring, expanding, right? 2011.
As soon as Peter joined,
to know.
it's all downhill from there.
Yeah, I've actually really...
Like we have the numbers for it.
The data does support that, just to be really clear. So, again, another good way to kill a church.
Yeah.
So bring me on the team.
Yeah.
But to observe the church growth piece, and then, like, you brought up Pete Rollins and your own personal doubt. It's like I feel like I got to be on the team while seeing the church go through another growth phase, while also personally observing your own, like, processing. Like, being at staff meetings was really interesting. Like, these are really interesting meetings.
Yeah, I know. I kind of wish I could go back and like, we were processing.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it was just a different, I imagine, I don't, what are other churches doing? I don't know.
Yeah.
But I imagine it was very interesting dynamic to watch it unfold in real time. And, you know, like we've said many times, you know, I was just growing up. The whole thing was like, I wasn't just this frozen person in his like mid 40s pastoring a church forever. Like, I was growing up the whole time. I was on a journey. And even though that's part of what drove people to the church, like, I'd be like, hey, I don't know if any of this is true. I was born in 1978. I don't know. But it seems like if we live like this, it might work well. And then just as we got further into the journey, I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure maybe not much of this is actually the truth. What a shift, you know? But yeah, that's what happens when you grow up publicly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess I want to know, like, when you had like book deals and you were, you know, in the green rooms with these other pastors, like, how do you think you maintained your integrity in your character? What was it that made you not look like everyone else?
Well, first, thanks for that. That's a pretty generous thing to say. I hope that's who I want to be. I mean, again, whatever someone thinks about my descent down the slippery slope to hell, it was done honestly.
It's true.
And openly. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, over the years, I've met with many pastors locally and around the country who were like, I agree, and they just don't tell their congregation these things. And that might be a good idea, actually. But I had a hard time. Like, I did it for a few years where, like, I had to go back after those years of, like, you know, basically jukeboxing again. Like, Rick Warren gave me all of his sermons he'd ever preached, you know? So when I'm going through all this, I was just like, I'm just going to put my own stories in and use Rick's stuff. And so buy myself some time so I can, but I could only do that for a little while. It was disintegrating me on the inside. So it was more about, like, it got too painful to live out of truth. I always joke around, like, I can't keep secrets. Like, if I get you a present, I better get it like the day before Christmas, or I'm going to give it to you immediately, like on November 4th or something ridiculous. So, you know, it has its downsides, but it's a good quality, I suppose, to have in a pastor.
It's preferable to some other qualities.
Yeah, right? I mean, you know, what people usually want is, like, you know, to keep the theology in tight, but also, you know, I didn't do that very well, but it's like, at least I tell you the truth. This is what I'm thinking. This is how I'm feeling. Sorry, this is hard for everybody. But also, I think I do want to say that I think I was going down in that direction. I remember seeing it rise up in myself. And I think, I don't know, let's call it the Holy Spirit. You know, something was like, do you see what you're turning into? Like, do you see how you like that? And there was just enough, conscience or Jiminy Cricket in there to be like, ooh, I even remember being in a green room setting and looking around the room and listening to pastors do their, you know, cool guy thing and just being like, ugh. And then feeling that judgment that I just had for, this is what, being immediately seeing, this is what you're in this room. You're part of this that you're like, you're that too. And I also think, you know, let me take the opportunity to say that, like, I hurt people for sure. Like, if you want to lead and you want to speak publicly for decades, like, I know I fucked up. I messed up. I'm so ashamed of the things I told people, like with how they should live their lives, or that they shouldn't live together or something, and they can't lead a group. Like, shut up! Like, get your face out of people's lives. So, the structure of how church, at least within the world we were in, works. There's this power that you just kind of get it because you're picking up this sword of God. And that's so dangerous. And I think I just at least want to acknowledge, while saying thank you for that beautiful compliment, and I want to be a person of integrity. Thank you for seeing me like that. That also, I have regrets about wielding that sword of God's word, and this is what God thinks and this is what God wants. And I get to judge who's, all that, just gross. I'm sorry. I don't want to. I'm glad I'm not in that anymore. And the older I've gotten, I think I'm more in touch with, how arrogance and youth can go together in some gross ways, you know what I mean? And anyway, just want to acknowledge that also is part of who I was.
I was thinking about what you might say in response to the charisma character question, because I also think, like, I have conversations to this day, even though I'm not in the church world anymore, but with friends, former colleagues, whatever, who are like still in their own journey of doubting and processing. I'm a safe place for people who can't talk to fellow pastors. Mm-hmm. And I think it's unique that you chose to tell people the whole time what you were thinking.
Almost.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I know you took your time to do it, but eventually you decided, like, I have to come clean, which I think is like its own interesting integrity, because I would think that everybody who I talk to that has their doubts wouldn't say I'm not a person of integrity, right? So, like, for some reason you linked a public kind of proclamation of my questions and doubts with integrity, which I think is uncommon, and maybe that's your wiring and your personality, but you just don't see that often, because I think a part of the role of the lead pastor, if you think about it, like, what is the CEO? Like, they kind of just need to, like, say the corporate line, right? Like, don't say anything, don't say anything crazy. Like, say we're innovating and we're going to grow. You know what I mean? Like, that's what companies need to say.
I know how to do this.
Right?
I'm obviously pretty good at it.
Exactly. Don't bring up all the stuff that's not going good in the company. Like, just, you know what I mean? So it's just interesting that you chose to do that. I wonder have you reflected, like, what about your personality or your wiring does that?
Oh, for sure. I felt deeply that I owed that to the church. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. People have argued me on that point, like friends, like, I don't think you needed it, But to me, that mattered, because I felt like I had, at some level, a relationship to this thing, this group, this congregation, this community of people, maybe because of the style of teaching that I did. I felt like I was opening my heart to everyone. And it was like, there's something big going on that I'm not telling them. And then there's also enough of my personality that also likes, I'm gonna just bring this into the field. I do this in my relationships. Like, I'm gonna say the thing and bring it out into the field, and now we get to see what happens, because I like intensity, and I like, let's hurry up and get to the truth. No matter how painful or difficult that is, it's interesting. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm just gonna say this, and it's not gonna be boring, and I'm not gonna run away, and then we're all gonna look at it together, and then we'll see what happens. And I remember telling the staff, like, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to start saying these things. And if you want to vote me off the island, now will be the time. And it's okay. You can do it anonymously. And, but I think everyone else had just enough of that in them too. Like, let's see what happens, And so one was, I was compelled. I felt like I owned it in relationally. And then the other one is, I do think I like intensity, and it felt like intense. It felt like so true, and like in the moment, like, this is fucking happening, and I'm gonna just say it, and then who knows what happens.
Yes.
I don't know. Yeah, that sounds
exciting. Sounds like in EastLake like sermon or message.
Sounds
Like that sounds like an East Lake staff meeting, right?
Yeah.
Of like, you don't know what it's going to be like, but it won't be boring.
Yeah. And I mean, the whole idea, like the truth will set you free is like another, let's hang on to that one, like the truth. I mean, even in my work that I do now with people, it's all about trust and the truth. Like relaxing in trust, which is kind of what East Lake was all about. Like, hey, everybody, doesn't matter who you are, show up with puke on your shirt because you're hungover. Like, it's like, hey, you're safe. So safety allows you to open and trust, which allows you to let your guard down. And then, because you're in that state, you can look at the truth. And when you can look at the truth, you can experience freedom. You can be liberated. You can see something from a higher perspective or whatever. So, yeah, I'm into that. In whatever context, I might be able to play with it.
Yeah.
For sure.
I'm just so glad that I happened upon East Lake. I was thinking about how many people have been, I don't know, like East Lake went through a phase where we was just like basically evangelical theology plus some swear words and some beer and like some Seahawks videos. There was like this, that's when I kind of joined and I was like, oh, this is fun. Like a funner version of evangelical. Like I can say like the shit and it's not a problem. That's all.
Yeah.
But because of your wiring or however, like that intensity piece and that like kind of radical authenticity or willingness to say the truth, like I was able to experience things that I've never experienced before, right? Like I wouldn't have been able to go down the path that I went down had you not been willing to share. So I just hope to hear gratitude in that way because
I do. Thank you.
I'm not alone in that, by the way. Like there's lots of people who...
Not me. Just kidding.
Kristen has major pushback. She'll share that in a second.
Still.
I just met a lot of East Lake...
Finally, I get to say my piece.
On the way out, I'm going to throw the bomb. And
That's actually another one of those canary in the mind moments. I'm like, Peter and Kristen have seen me in all these things, in everything. They've seen me in the worst moments in meetings, like all this stuff. And Aaron was my assistant forever and one of my closest friends. And I'm like, okay, every time I'm like, am I okay? Am I doing a good job? Am I a decent human being? I'm like, these people know who I am. And they love me. So I'm okay. I'm doing okay.
Yeah. I do think that's a nice thing that you brought up, though, too. Just that criticize you for what you would like. People have. So you're aware of those things. But I've always felt like you tell me the truth. I haven't ever felt like you lied to us, which is nice and appreciated.
Yeah, at least it's the truth of what I think, It could be
you're
totally
true.
the fucking false nonsense. But at least that's where I'm at.
Right.
Yeah. And that was true even when I was like hardcore evangelical Christian. I believed that. I wasn't fucking around with anybody. Mm-hmm. Like I was all the way in. Like I'm there early setting up chairs and praying over them because somebody who's sitting in this chair is going to go from death to life today, and salvation. And we were talking earlier before we started filming that like I actually cry a lot less in my life. I mean, I'm still in touch with my emotions and I feel like I have a healthy relationship to my emotional life and I do cry when it wants to come through. But I feel like I used to cry so much more. And there's something about, I think I was terrorized. Like I need to communicate a critical message that these people need because the wages of sin is death. Like I was sold out. Yeah. And to be relieved from that has been like salvation, my own salvation.
Yeah.
It's really nice to be on that side of it. I'm like, there's nothing to weep about, as hard all the time. Like we're going to be okay. The world's got enough things to weep about.
Yeah, that's funny.
You don't need to be about, by the way, when you're done with this shit show, God's really pissed. Like, oh my God, this is horrible news.
I can relate to that. I feel like I got saved at EastLake. I've shared that before, but just the idea of being relieved of that anxiety, of all the pressure. I think coming to EastLake and observing your intensity, though, right? Like, I don't. It was just being reminded, like, I don't cry about that. It's like, no, I haven't lost a wink of sleep about people going to hell. And it's like, do I honestly believe it then? Like,
I'm pretty comfortable with it if I do.
Like, how am I sleeping so well? Like, I wonder if I actually believe it. So, like, your intensity it was like a bit of a mirror. I'm like, I click on Netflix. Like, yeah, it could happen, but like it's a mirror of like, I'm not
That's
sure.
my neighbor Dave. He's going to hell too.
Totally. So like to have somebody live it out so intensely is helpful to kind of help reveal like bring alignment to my stated belief versus my lived out.
Yeah, that's what helped me. I'm like, I care a lot about this. I feel like God's pretty comfy with the arrangement. And I thought he's in charge. It's like that snapped, at some point. And it needed to be that polarity needed to be so stark for that to crack. So super glad that I was hella into it. That's what it took.
I appreciate that reflection because you were known as like the guy who cried all the time.
I know,
that was like
totally.
a thing. It was like,
So
there he goes
it.
again.
I know.
And it was
Boo-hoo. I was like, I remember every time I feel like coming, I'd be like, and then we were doing like 4 services a weekend. I'm like, geez, I'm gonna like be so swollen tomorrow.
I'm sure you had like adrenal failure.
It's funny though to like make fun of you for that in retrospect because it's like it's hilarious. This guy's crying about people going to hell.
That poor kid is scared people are going to hell. Like I remember at that stage in my life, I was like in San Diego visiting my parents, and my dad's oldest brother was in town. He's total like outspoken atheist, great guy. Actually, recently passed away. Amazing uncle. And I remember them talking about something, and I got into the conversation like I'm going to try to save him, and I'm like crying, like, and my dad's pretty calm. I think I should ask my dad, like, what was that like for you? Like, you're 20-something-year-old, also a pastor's son, just like bawling, trying to get Uncle Hal to give his life to Jesus. And I mean, it was real to me. I'm like, why? We don't need to turn on the game. Hal is going to hell. What matters more than that? You know what I mean? And so, there's something about, I guess, taking that seriously that helps you realize you don't have to take it seriously at all.
It's just funny for Christians to make fun of you for that. Like, this guy's crying about people going to hell. We've been thinking this for years.
Yeah. And then when I'm like, I don't believe in hell, they're like, ooh, you're going to hell.
You used to care too much, and now you don't care enough. We like to ratchet right in the middle.
I can't seem to do it right.
Neither extremism.
Yeah.
Okay, I have shifting gears. Maybe not. This might be part of the integrity thing, but there was a pivotal moment where you decided, I don't want to speak as much. When everybody else, it felt like, was, how often can I speak? How many books can I write? How many events can I go speak at? And you were like, how much less can I talk? And I just want to see if you can go back to that particular decision-making process and what that was.
Yeah, well, one, it's boring for me. Like, if it's just me talking, I'm not learning anything. And I loved when someone else, like, I liked being like, this is what I want to go through. Like, I could still curate content, but not control. I couldn't control it then. And that's when it gets interesting. Like, so I could curate, like, I want to go in these directions, but it's going to be like, it's like I said earlier, like, what's going to happen? And I get bored. I'll get bored. So if this is going to be a community I'm going to go to, like, I want to be challenged. And that's when I'm the guy being the voice all the time, like, that I'm not going to get that. I'm going to need to go somewhere else or whatever. And this is my community. So that's part of the reason. The other one is, like, we don't need another church with a white guy, a cis hetero white guy speaking 52 weeks a year. So that part's a little more on the obvious side. I could bring in so many different perspectives if doesn't have to be one other white guy. And amazing. And we had so much fun with who we could bring in. And so that experimentation, which is always like been the fun thing about EastLake. We're like, I would always warn everybody, all you guys, like, this isn't going to last because we're going to risk it on experiments all the time. What if we do it like this? Then what happens? Play fast and loose with it. And that's what made it fun.
One of my questions for you, and you offered this up already, was, do you have regrets? And not that you need to list them out, but yes or no, do you?
Chris Stevens, I'm so sorry.
But
there's probably somebody named Chris Stevens in what?
He's like,
I don't remember.
No, he's like, fine.
Shouldn't have said that.
Finally, you finally come.
Exactly. God damn it.
And What have they taught you? What are the lessons that you take from some of those? And just in general, if you look back at the idea of regrets.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the big ones was getting so wrapped up in heaven and God's agenda that I missed some times with my oldest kids. So for sure, that's you can't change that. But like I had a theology that like what was primary was, what was eternal. And so that's the loss. Thankfully, I have wonderful relationships with my kids. And I honestly would say because of what happened, all the shitstorm at EastLake has provided me such good relationships with my adult children. Like I would burn that church down again tomorrow because of what I got at the end was because of it. It's just these amazing, authentic, loving relationships with my adult kids. I think early on I was so worried about like I'd seen so much abuse in the church where like the pastors became royalty that I wanted to be so the opposite of that I undervalued my own energy and I let people just use me up and I gave more than I could. I'm not blaming anyone for that other than me. Like I needed to be like, I can't sit at the front until everyone leaves and I'm the last person to go. And I exhausted myself, trying to feel everyone, like not just be there for everyone, but feel with them. And I didn't do a good job of taking care of myself. And then the other side of that was I let Michelle kind of get taken advantage of a little too much. And because I'm like, I just didn't want to be the opposite of that, where we just get worshipped and taken care of, but also like, God, my wife could use some fucking support. We have 4 kids and I'm gone all day today. And I couldn't imagine letting, my wife be taken good care of by the church. And I'm like, that was shitty. Yeah. So I regret that. And then just like a number of times where, my youthful, just being a kid in charge, just saying dumb stuff and treating people with a little bit too much of a dismissiveness or being too quick with staff transitions where I was like, oh, you could have gone a little softer and gentler there. And I would have, in fact, I've circled back with people a few times over the years and been like, hey, I would have done that differently and I'm sorry. And then there are other regrets that I'm like, but if I would have done it different, then I wouldn't have had experienced the things that ended up being so good about that for me. So like, for instance, multi-site. Like I would, like right now I'd be like, oh my God, never do multi-site. Like if somebody was like, I'm in a church, I'm like, well, one, you should quit. It's awful. But if you're going to do it anyway, don't go multi-site. Like that was I got convinced into that by like the guys, I was always like following these bigger leaders who were like coaching me up and they're like, you Meeks, you got to do this. You've been out of space for years, whatever. And I was having so much fun, even though I was having this like existential crisis about my faith in the background. The truth was I was having so much fun in my life. And multi-site, it like killed everything that I loved about EastLake, which was like, we didn't even podcast. We were like, if you don't want to be here with us, with the we, then go download somebody else. Everybody else is podcasting. Like this is a thing that we're doing and it happens right here for real. And I loved the energy of that. Again, I think I'm just noticing how that keeps coming back up. Like, let's see what fucking happens today. And multi-site forced a like homogeneity of like churn out this is how we do everything, Multi-site forced us to be something different.
Scale.
Yeah. Scale the model. Yeah. It was very corporate-y and
system.
I didn't like that.
Central support.
But again, there were so many things that were good about that I needed.
Plus multi-site, I think gave us longer runway to do inclusion.
For sure.
I'm not sure financially we could have pulled off inclusion without multi-site because of how locked up the money got in equity.
Couldn't agree more.
Which allowed us to learn the wrong way and do, like you said, put down the dog in an ethical way.
Yes. Well, and because we all know that time, because of that, because stuff was in equity, we could keep going further as a group. Because there's the story of what was going on at EastLake, but as soon as we started sliding down the slippery slope, that what was really happening was there was a little Fellowship of the Ring on a journey, and that was the staff, and everyone's like, we're changing quite a bit, and it's all happening, and we needed each other, and we stuck together. But without that, and remember the windfall of when we went to one location? Yeah. We had all these like struggling campuses that are like, oh, my friends left and they're angry that I'm going to hell. And they were like, let's all just come back. And it was like this big gathering. And we're like, oh, there's actually quite a few of us here. And that boon was really helpful to keep it kind of running. And then, basically it just turned into this like the methadone that lets people finally let go of Christianity. And they're like, oh, I'm sobered up. I realize I don't need church at all. We're like, yep, that's how this works. We're basically working ourselves out of a job. But multi-site for sure is what allowed us to do that. So
I just look at my own life and I can look back and say like, oh, sure, I regret that. But I don't know, do you feel like in the end, unless I'm asking both of you, does it all work together?
For the good of
those
who love Christ Jesus? Good of those who love.
I don't know. I think they're all the rings of life inside of a tree of like,
yeah.
I don't know. I'm sure there's things that I would be like, I absolutely would not do that again. Cut it out, and my life is better now because of it. But I feel like in the end, the hardest things and
hologram.
Okay, good. Here's an example.
We found it. Oh my gosh, the worst weekend of
that was terrible.
Our lives.
It was really awful.
Yeah.
That was not the worst.
And some of my favorite moments.
Yes.
Like living in that building with Jason and Grant and Jonah and Dan Kretz, and we just murdered our bodies, smoking cigarettes and drinking beer in that thing. And the whole staff for large swaths of the time.
There was one weekend where we were at the University of Washington campus until like midnight trying to get it to go back to Buffalo.
Yeah. We made Tom and Dan fly to the East Coast to learn how to set up a satellite to outer space every week so we can do a live stream to Bellevue. Oh my God. Do you remember how geeky dorky they got about it?
Yeah.
They were like, we're so great.
Oh my God. I don't know. Awesome. I guess I'm just wondering, do you feel like
I do.
Maybe there's a handful of things that you toss out and life is the same now, had it not happened. But for the most part, would you say all of those, most of the things that you look back on are like, oof, I would have done it differently. Maybe you wouldn't have because you want to be who you are now.
Yeah, I mean, I like how Peter Crone says it. It happened the way it happened, and it couldn't have happened any other way because it didn't. So it's like, it eliminates I love that idea. It couldn't have happened any other way. Well, why? Because it didn't. Mm-hmm. Like the past is unchangeable. So what is regret for? Like hopefully we can learn from our mistakes. And yet I do believe, I mean, I'm not the Christ Jesus part maybe, but that it's up to you to decide whether everything in your life can work to your benefit. Hmm. I don't think it's automatic. You can let your whole life be just a tragedy. Or you can be like, man, cancer really taught me a lot. And when I got fucking publicly humiliated and my church blew up in my face, and that taught me a lot. And I'm not like trying to Pollyanna frame something that was hard. It really is true. Like it was good for me. But again, I don't think that's automatic. I think we have to decide to like look at the, half shit sandwich that life on earth can be and be like, I'm going to choose to, I guess at some level, trust that whatever I really am deep inside, behind the personality, behind the ego, behind the nonsense, that it's good and that life is good and that I can trust that it can all be used and recycled, for beauty and for forgiveness. And isn't it true? Even like sometimes the worst things, like think about it in relationships. Like I think the hardest times Michelle and I have ever had are the places where the biggest gifts came to our relationship. And so I wouldn't want to take away those horrible, horrible moments, because the intimacy that those offered us through the healing of those pains, I mean, it's made our relationship better. And so life, I think for sure life is like that. Like, your capacity to hold pain as you expand it, it means that your capacity to hold joy and beauty and all that stuff is so much bigger. Like that, you think about last night with all the staff, like we went through the shit together and everyone's laugh. Like we know how to laugh because we know how to cry. I think they're not, you can't separate them.
Thinking about hologram. Just throwing out there, okay, some of your favorite memories. When you think about like the greatest times you had at EastLake, what comes to mind? What do you think about?
Oh man, there's so many years of good times. I mean, staff retreats were the best.
Yes.
Like,
that's on my list.
Yeah. The moments of like, I mean, it's funny. It's like, again, it goes back to like shitty moments are all the best moments. Like sleeping in the building, you know, like ripping carpet out of the Monroe campus. Like, Monroe. What were we doing in Monroe, guys? What were we doing?
Not on my list.
I was pregnant at that time, and I sat in a rocking chair and watched all of you guys.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I was sleeping in my bus in the parking lot.
It's terrible.
Glory. January 25th, 2015. I mean, when we made that statement, it was just, if it is a thing, something in my soul was like, without question, this was the right thing to do. Like I felt like, yeah, whatever it means to be in full alignment with your destiny. Like, the early days with like some of my best friends started in the church, like Pat and JP, and you know, it's just like those were golden moments where friends were like, that thing that the staff ended up becoming, the way that started was with me and my friends and Michelle and our friends. Like, yeah, it was like we were that. We were close people who loved each other and wanted to like have a great time and make a meaningful life. The only thing we knew how to do that with was with the Jesus narrative, you know, which is great. But really, that's what it came down to, you know. Those moments for sure. Drinks for Drinks was super fun. We loved throwing parties. We were good at it. I don't know. What about you guys? I'm curious what you would say.
Getting snowed in at staff retreat. I'm always in the top.
Like staff retreat and extra staff retreat.
Staff retreat that got extended?
I believe I gave up my bed so that you and Brittany could come and stay in that bunk room.
We appreciate that.
Yes.
Yeah,
you were in the bunk room for years.
I was in the single bunk room. That's not one of my favorite memories. They put all the single people in a bunk room together.
It's kind of a frat house mentality for sure.
It was terrible punishment for being single.
Yeah, for sure. I realized last night I haven't drank as much as I drank last night with the staff since I was on staff at EastLake. Right? This has been very good for my health to not work here.
That's the biggest thing. You don't smoke anymore. You don't drink anymore.
I don't smoke anymore. I don't drink anymore. Wow, I really need to leave Christianity.
But I look back at Eastlake and the different chapters, and I think my favorite memories are just like feeling full of like purpose, and like I was like going after whatever the thing was that we were going after at the time, and it felt good to like have that purpose.
That's on my list too. The one thing that came up as you were sharing, to be on a leadership team where you can bring up, like it's safe to bring up when your honest opinion isn't common. I feel like as I've left EastLake, you kind of have, I feel like it's pretty easy to kind of get a little bit into self-protection, like brand management. And I feel like on the team that we had, I feel like it was very positive to tell the truth, even if it was a dissenting opinion, which is very positive. I also think to be on a team where you can make real change is uncommon too. Like I feel like in lots of roles, you're kind of like, I don't get to make that choice. Like that's not a thing. And I feel like to be on a leadership team where it's like we can choose to do what we want. We can choose to do anything. What do we want to do?
Totally.
Is a very invigorating, exciting experience. And like you said, hope to have those opportunities again in the future. But that's something that I'm like grateful that I got to experience that.
Yeah, me too. That's the part of that like sort of revolutionary, what's the word I'm thinking of? Like anarchist.
Yes,
part
that's what
of
we
me.
called you. Right?
Yeah, like
mutiny.
Yeah, mutiny. Right. It's just like this. You can't do that. Oh, yeah. That's why we started our own. Like we can do whatever we want.
Yeah.
We have a liquor license. Like, you know what I mean? Just stupid stuff now. Like I'm like, that's not even edgy to me now. But back then it's like, yeah, we don't have a phone number and we don't do any of the, what's your discipleship night? We don't do that. Yeah. Other churches are for that, or whatever our answer was at the time. And making videos that you're like, you cannot play this on a Sunday. And we're like, we're gonna play it. You know what I mean? I loved. That's just something about my personality that really likes that.
That's on the list too. The making of those CX videos. I was in none. I wasn't ever in a CX video, but I would just kind of come and hang out and watch like, looks like they're making a video. It's
so
just hovering around fun. Like the energy.
Yeah, it is. At the end of the day, we started a fun thing. Let's just be real about it. And it got serious. We didn't realize like what it would be, at the end. But again, what made it unique wasn't that we used the Bible or any of it wasn't even unique that we said, Jesus died for your sins. Like none of that is like what made it a thing. Oh, that's a different thing over there. It was the people, the personnel, and the fact that it was like, there was so much life and joy at the center of it. And that's for sure what I'll miss. And what I'm committed to continuing to cultivate in my life, like just joy and laughter, and because all the things that make life worth living, and I don't mean that to the expense of pain and difficulty, because I hope I've been clear already that I think you have to have both to expand both, to feel both. So it's like to really be in the truth that like, oh, I'm hurting so bad, or if someone's hurting so bad, and my friend or whatever, and oh my God, this is so fun. Being able to live in the both sides of that is like that's the engine of reality. Love it.
I think one of the things that just came to mind that I think is interesting is that because I just said we're talking a lot about being on staff because that's our perspective of our experiences. But I also feel like I do see still groups of friends who met each other because of EastLake or at EastLake, and they are still each other's best friends and raising their kids together and moving to different states together. Oh, yeah. And I think one of the greatest things that EastLake taught me was just how to find my people, how to find those safe people who are going to live with me in that pain and in the joy. And I think when we were at Juanita and starting to do like just online stuff, one of the things we kept saying was like, I hope people have learned how to find that community because we're not always going to be able to give it to you on a Sunday morning.
Facilitate that all the time. Yeah, totally.
And I think EastLake really did do that, at least for me and for some of the people that I still see out in the world.
Oh yeah, for sure.
People are living with their communities that they built through this place. So
yeah,
that's an encouraging.
I still get people who will like once in a while like send a message like that, like, hey, just wanted to say I was at EastLake for this and my best friends, or even like I've had a lot over the past like 4 years, people reach out and be like, hey, sorry I bitched you out at like
I was wondering that, like
my kid came out to me yesterday and I get it now, or I couldn't have had the beautiful conversation I had with my daughter if you hadn't have pissed me off so bad in 2015 and I had to process it for 2 years before I could, you know what I mean? That kind of stuff. I've had a lot of those.
I'm so glad you have.
And only one would have been worth it, right? I mean, it was already worth it, but it's like, yeah, because there's plenty of places that are towing the old line still. So it's just fun to see that it's got legs, man. I mean, I've had so many clients who they were like, oh, they live across the country and they're like, oh, I followed EastLake for years watching this thing. And, it was been such an inspiration to me and my family and we never heard of them. Right. But so it's cool to see it's just had this long tail that we'll never know, all the cool ways that it's done some beautiful thing in someone's life, but we can trust it. It is true.
I just want to say thank you. Thanks for starting EastLake. It's crazy to think about, but like, thank you for starting it. I can't fathom like how my life would have gone. I have a hunch. Actually, I can't fathom, unfortunately. I have a hunch that looks pretty similar, but with a perspective that was less open. And I'm just so glad that I happened upon EastLake when I did. And I'm so glad that you were willing to go on your journey, make it so public, live in integrity, all of those character traits that we talked about. And I said this to Michelle, too, when we talked with her. But I love you. Thanks for being my friend. And thanks for all of your work personally that you were willing to like open to others to observe, because I am certain I wouldn't have been able to experience a lot of the things that I've been able to grow in and change in had I not had somebody who was brave enough to go in front of me, because I was like, I can do it. I think a couple months after he did it, about 10% of the capacity that he did it. You know what I mean? So you made it safe to learn how to ask questions. You talked about kind of growing up at EastLake, and I honestly felt like I became an adult where I could like have more critical thinking skills at EastLake. And there's 100 life lessons, leadership lessons that I can apply and still able to take to my future life, which is great because of EastLake, but just from who I am and my values. Thank you. Thanks for doing this. It's a labor of love. And I'm glad that you went through all the shit you did for me. Easy to say, but I just want you to know, like, I have deep gratitude for you and for Michelle and for all of your hard work over the years. So I hope you hear that.
All the things Peter just said. I'm so grateful for you. I mean, I don't think I wanted to go on any sort of journey like this. And I don't think I would have. So I don't think I ever would have had the courage to look beyond what was safe and easy to say. If I wasn't like right next to you, watching you do all of this stuff. I feel like we were with you, but we were watching and learning from you. And I'm so grateful. There was 2 moments that I wanted to say. I'm sure you I don't know if you remember them or not, but the first one was I had a year-end review with you at the Outback Steakhouse.
What? Okay.
And you said to me, KB, I need you to use your voice. And I need you to speak up, because I can tell you have thoughts and things that you don't say. I just think that was like life-changing for me, for you to be like, I need you to use your voice. And how lots of leaders probably don't ask for that. They don't ask for the feedback, and I think I was probably one that gave I ended up giving a lot of like pump the brakes feedback over the years.
For sure. Thank God.
And then the other one was when you texted me and you were on a train to Canada.
Oh, yeah.
Probably to get a bus.
Yep.
Yeah. And you were like, hey, would you ever want to speak at EastLake on the stage? And that was transformative for me too, because I live a lot in my head. And so to be forced to like speak things out loud and figure out what I think about things, I don't think I would have had the courage to do that either, unless it was like, you're doing it at 9 a.m. on Sunday, so you better.
It's a little bit of a pressure, isn't it?
Yeah.
So thanks for helping me find my voice and telling me that it was valuable.
Well, thanks to both of you. I love you so much, both of you. I respect the absolute shit out of you both. I feel like I have a pretty good idea of who you are. And you're just such lovely people. To have you tell me that you respect my integrity, that's all I see in you ever. Both of you. Just such deep, beautiful lives of integration and honesty. So it means a lot. And I'm so glad that you chose to follow the invitation to speak up. Because, wow, so many people have learned from you, including me. It was so important that you speak. And Peter, you too, man. I love the way that you communicate, and it would have been such a loss to not have both of you help lead and direct and shepherd and shape what I feel like the most significant. It wasn't the flashiest era, but it was the most significant era of EastLake's history. It was something very special going on while the walls were caving in. Like, it's funny now, but it's like, wow, there was. Oh, it's so funny. I just had a memory. Do you remember when we were at the airport taking communion together? Mm-hmm. I don't remember exactly what was happening.
It was after we went to Highlands.
Yeah, I remember we had gone to that affirming church, and we were all so fucking convicted to the core that we had no idea what love and redemption and acceptance meant until we had been there. And then we're at the airport just bawling, everyone crying, and somehow we're figuring out how to give each other communion. Yeah. And it actually doesn't even matter what the specific details of all that was. But I think that for me, that stands as like almost like a framed moment of like something so deep was being shifted in our hearts. Yeah. You know, that's just an example, an event example of like, you know, for whatever happened at EastLake, I think the real story is that we all got caught up in something that blew through town. And there was you couldn't walk away from it. You're like, I'm in this thing now. I'm in the stir of it. And we're just going to see where it lands. And it was such a ride, and I'm so glad. So thanks for getting caught up in it with us. It was awesome.
We need each other for it, that's for sure.
What's the final word? How does this end?
That's it.
Yeah.
Just gratitude.
Goodbye, EastLake. Thanks for all the memories. That was really fun. Did you see that? That was crazy.
That was crazy.
Woo!
I thought that's a good.
That's pretty much it. Yeah. That's the best way to say goodbye to EastLake. What the